Okay, you already know how this story ends. Toys R Us, the greatest toy store the world ever built, is gone. And you probably think you know why. Amazon, right? The internet. Kids staring at screens instead of playing with toys. That's the story everyone repeats. It's also wrong. Because when Toys R Us finally died in 2018, it wasn't some withered has-been the internet had left behind. It was still one of the biggest toy sellers on the planet. More than 700 American stores, billions of dollars in sales, millions of families still walking through its doors. And then, in a matter of months, all of it vanished. Every American store closed. Around 33,000 people out of work. And the man who built the whole thing from nothing died 1 week after they announced the end. So, if it wasn't Amazon, what actually killed Toys R Us? The answer isn't a competitor, it's a number, a single, crushing number, buried on a balance sheet. This is the rise and fall of Toys R Us. To understand how it died, you have to understand how enormous it really was. And it all started with one very simple idea. 1948. A 25-year-old named Charles Lazarus opens a little baby furniture shop in Washington, D.C. But he notices something. The parents keep coming back, not for cribs, but for toys. Because here's what Lazarus understood before almost anyone. Kids break toys. Kids outgrow toys. And every single birthday, every Christmas, they want more. Toys weren't a one-time sale. They were forever. So in 1957, he builds something new. A store that sells nothing but toys. Thousands of them, stacked to the ceiling all year round, at prices the little corner shops simply couldn't touch. He called it Toys R Us, with that backwards R like a child had scrolled it. He gave it a friendly giraffe named Geoffrey. And he basically invented a new kind of store. So big, so cheap, and so complete that it swallowed every competitor around it. Retail people have a name for this. They call it a category killer. And kill it did. Through the 70s and 80s, Toys R Us didn't just win the toy business. It became the toy business. By 1989, it was selling almost $5 billion of toys a year, and it controlled around a quarter of the entire American toy market. 1 in every 4 toys. And if you were a kid back then, there was nothing. Nothing like the day your parents said you could pick something out at Toys R Us. By the 1990s, Toys R Us had simply won. The game was over. More than 1,400 stores around the world. A giant blue warehouse of childhood in every American suburb. It even had a jingle a whole generation can still sing. I don't want to grow up. I'm a Toys R Us kid. For millions of people, that place wasn't a store. It was a feeling. But there's a quiet danger in winning this completely. You get comfortable. You stop watching the doors. And while Toys R Us stood there as king of the toy aisle, 2 very different stores were walking right past it. And they weren't toy stores at all. Their names were Walmart and Target. They were everything stores. And they'd realized something dangerous. They could sell the hottest toys at almost no profit, sometimes even at a loss, just to pull parents through the door to buy everything else. The groceries, the clothes, the new television. But Toys R Us only sold toys. It had no everything else to fall back on. It simply couldn't win a price war it had no other way to pay for. And it began to lose. Slowly, at first. In 1990, Toys R Us held about a quarter of the American toy market. By 1997, that had slipped toward 18%. And in 1998, the unthinkable happened. Walmart passed Toys R Us to become the #1 toy seller in America. The king had been knocked off its throne, not by a better toy store, but by a store that barely cared about toys at all. So Toys R Us needed to fight back, and over the next few years, it made 2 decisions that would seal its fate. The first was about the internet. By the year 2000, it was obvious that shopping was moving online, and Toys R Us needed a real website. So it made a deal. In 2000, it signed a 10-year agreement with a young online retailer called Amazon. The terms? Toys R Us would pay Amazon around $50 million a year, plus a cut of sales, to be the exclusive seller of toys on Amazon.com. And as part of that deal, it shut down its own website and sent all of its customers straight to Amazon. Think about what that means. The biggest toy retailer in the world just handed its entire digital future to Amazon. It stopped learning how to sell online because Amazon was doing it for them, and then Amazon, surprising absolutely no one, started letting other companies sell toys on its site too. Toys R Us sued. It even won and walked away in 2009 with about $51 million. But by then, it was far too late. It had thrown away the entire decade the internet was being built. No website, no warehouses, no online muscle of any kind. It had gift-wrapped a 10-year head start and handed it to the one company that would help bury it. But the internet blunder wasn't the fatal one. The fatal one came in 2005. And it didn't come from Silicon Valley. It came from Wall Street. 3 financial firms, the private equity giants KKR and Bain Capital, and the property company Vornado, teamed up to buy Toys R Us for $6.6 billion. It sounds like a vote of confidence. It was the opposite, because of how they paid for it. The maneuver is called a leveraged buyout. And here's the trick. Of that $6.6 billion, these firms only put up about $1.3 billion of their own money. The rest, more than $5 billion, they borrowed. And then they did the thing that sounds like it should be illegal, but isn't. They put that debt not on themselves, but on Toys R Us. The company was forced to borrow the money used to buy itself. Overnight, a company that had owned most of itself outright was buried in debt. Around 78% of it. The toy store that generations of kids adored now owed the banks roughly $400 million a year. Just in interest, just to stand still. Now do the math that Toys R Us had to do every single year. The company still worked, kids still came. At the store level, it was still making money. A few $100 million in a good year. But it owed around $400 million a year just to service that debt. Almost everything it earned went straight out the door to lenders, before a single dollar could touch the actual business. And this is the part that's so quietly brutal. Remember everything Toys R Us desperately needed to do? Fix its tired, cavernous stores, finally build a real website, match Walmart and Amazon on price. All of that costs money. And Toys R Us had none left because it was all going to pay for its own buyout. While Amazon poured billions into the future, Toys R Us was bleeding out, paying for its past. Its new owners, meanwhile, collected hundreds of millions in fees along the way. For more than a decade, the company limped forward under that weight. And then, in 2017, the bill came due. Billions in debt had to be refinanced, and the lenders got nervous. In September 2017, Toys R Us filed for bankruptcy. Even then, the plan was to survive. Shed the debt, keep the stores open, but the damage ran too deep, and a weak holiday season that year was the final blow. In March 2018, the company gave up. Every American store, more than 700 of them, would be liquidated, closed forever. And here's the cost that never shows up on a balance sheet. Around 33,000 employees lost their jobs. Many had given their whole working lives to that company. And the severance they'd been promised, cancelled, to save money for the creditors. Workers walked out with nothing, while the lawyers and bankers running the bankruptcy billed tens of millions in fees. Only after public outrage did KKR and Bain set up a fund for those workers. $20 million, a fraction of what was owed. and pennies next to the billions that had already been pulled out. So, one last time, what actually killed Toys R Us? It wasn't Amazon, it wasn't Walmart, it wasn't the internet, or screens, or kids who stopped playing with toys. Those were real pressures. But plenty of companies survive real pressure. Toys R Us was killed by a math problem it was never allowed to solve. $5 billion of debt it didn't ask for, never spent on itself, and could never climb out from under. It didn't die because it stopped selling toys. It died because it was turned into something to be squeezed. And there's a final human detail I can't stop thinking about. Charles Lazarus, the man who started it all with a single baby furniture shop, who dreamed up Geoffrey and the backwards R and the whole magical idea. He was still alive to watch it end. He died on March 22nd, 2018, 1 week after his company announced that every last store would close. He lived just long enough to see his life's work taken apart. That's the uncomfortable lesson buried under all the nostalgia. A business can survive a tough competitor. It can survive a changing world if you give it the room to change with it. What it often can't survive is being loaded up with debt and drained for parts. Sometimes the villain isn't the rival in the headlines. Sometimes it's the owner on the paperwork. Toys R Us isn't completely gone, by the way. The brand still flickers, a few stores tucked inside other shops, a name traded between companies. But the empire, the temple of childhood that Charles Lazarus built, that closed for good, and it didn't have to. If you want more stories of giants brought down, sometimes from the outside and sometimes from within, subscribe and tell me in the comments, whose rise and fall should we tell next?